Yeah.
Sure.
So as an icebreaker, I already told
hmm
Drew, the first question is going to be really simple. How did you guys start all this? Where did this come from?
So a lot of it came from our own personal experience. Before we even thought about this organization, just like maybe 1 or 2 weeks into the quarantine, we were both, serving our own grandparents who didn't want to leave the house because of the dangers to their own personal well-being. And so every week or maybe twice a week, we would do deliveries to our own grandparents. And then one day we just met up because we were trying to negotiate our carpool, and we started talking about, what we were doing in our lives. And if we found out that both of us are doing the same thing, delivering to our grandparents who are vulnerable during this crisis. And that's where the organization and the idea really came from, an aspect of our personal lives that we were both struggling to address. And then we thought about, what about seniors who are out there that might not have family to depend on? What if there are seniors out there who don't have grandchildren to support them? How are we going to help them? And that's where the organization came from.
Um, yeah, great. I mean, I was going through your website and obviously you guys started in Montgomery County. Um,
hmm
and how did you guys from a very local, what seems a local organization, end up serving to families all the way across the country from California to New York to Massachusetts, Virginia, even Montreal? How did that in such a short period of time become a reality?
Yeah, so when we first started, you're right, it was very, very localized organization, and we honestly weren't really expecting to expand nationally, at least so quickly. But within weeks, people found out about us from news articles who were in like Howard County, which is a neighboring county. We're in Virginia, which is a state right next to ours. So we got a lot of people outside of Montgomery County who were really interested, and this led to a lot of like state level press, which in turn sort of catapulted us to the national scene. And that's when we got our request from CNN, which is, I don't know, a famous American news outlet. And I think that article was what led to the majority of our attention, both nationally as well as in Montreal. Because after that article went live, we got people from all over the country who said that they saw us there. And we made sure that it was included in the article that we were willing to help someone start a chapter, if they reached out to us. And so we got a lot of requests from people who are interested in doing just that. So we think it's mainly due to that article, and I guess more broadly, like the press that we got at the beginning state.
Yeah, adding up to what you said, how does it feel to have coverage from, obviously, as you said, CNN? I was reading the article this morning.
Mhm.
How does a 16-year-old sophomore encounter or feel when CNN wants to write about what they're doing?
Yeah, so like Matthew was saying, when we started this, we really just expected it to be, just a few friends from school, maybe a dozen hanging out doing deliveries, maybe twice a week. We definitely didn't expect to expand so quickly, and we didn't expect to encounter huge news organizations like CNN. Growing up, I've read CNN, read the Post, I've read these major news organizations, and they always seem like, they discuss issues on a national scale that really affected us all and were of great importance. And so the idea of seeing one of our own articles or about our organization on that stage kind of meant a lot to us, because it meant A, that people are starting to pay attention to what we do, and B, that, news organizations really appreciate the fact that we're willing to go out there, deliver to these seniors, and make a difference in our community. And I think getting that kind of press has what led me to, see the media as more of something that's tangible and accessible for teens, and not something that, just discusses high level politics or things that don't really matter in our everyday lives.
Yeah, I think Drew made a good point that like to a certain extent the media was like a validation to what we were doing, and it made us realize that like the national issues that the media usually talks about, if they manage to make time for us, then it's sort of putting us on that level. So the media is essentially saying indirectly that like your organization is really useful, what you're doing is really important, and that really means a lot to us. That something that we started that was intended just to be a local project has become something that even national news organizations are proud to report on.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. And as a consequence of that, as you said previously, you guys got a lot more requests for deliveries. Were you guys at that point ready to fulfill all of those deliveries, or did you have to expand in some like pretty quick way in order to achieve all the demand?
Yeah, so we did get a lot of demand from that CNN article, but we also got a lot of teens who are willing to sign up. And so far, we've been able to meet that demand pretty well. Right now, to give you a bit of context, we have about 250 volunteers in the Montgomery County area, and we've done over 350 deliveries, many of them repeat deliveries. And right now, we have enough teens to sustain the seniors that are in our community. But as we start expanding into, like other communities, like you said, in California, in New York, and Canada, those communities might not have as many volunteers to match the large amounts of seniors who could potentially benefit from the service. And in that case, they need to do things like reach out to local organizations like the YMCA or swim teams or local groups of volunteers that could potentially help out. Things like the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts or organizations like that can really help us fulfill our delivery margins and deliver to enough seniors. So we've been able to keep up with demand so far, and thanks to these partnerships with other organizations, we're able to fulfill coming demand.
So I assume that that's what's actually allowing you guys to fulfill the demand today. In the near future, because this organization is obviously growing at a really fast rate, do you guys think there will be that point where you won't be able to actually supply everyone? You'll have to
Um,
say no to someone in some way.
yeah, well, actually, we have already had to say no to people. Um, Except it's not really our target demographic because we've gotten a lot of, like, for example, we have people saying like, my my parents live like, down the block and they're not able to go grocery shopping. Can you do it for them? And in those cases, we have to be like, well, we have people who don't have family members nearby who can help. So sorry, but we're gonna have to, defer that request. So we have had to turn people down. But the target demographic of our organization, which is, really people who don't have family and who are elderly or who do have severe immune issues, those people we have been able to fill all the requests for. And what we've seen is that there seems to be enough interest among teenagers across the nation, where we've been able to fulfill that demographics requests. And we don't anticipate any problems with that because right now we're moving into summer, where teens will have a lot more time to help out. So even if our organization does grow more quickly among seniors, we expect that the time off school will allow it to grow comparably among teenagers as well.
And going back to the organization itself and what you guys do, can you give me a brief description of how it works, and what your service looks like?
hmm So the goal of Teens Helping Seniors is to provide contactless deliveries of necessities such as grocery and medication to vulnerable seniors in the community. And so what this looks like is that when a senior either phones in or emails us or through our website gives us a grocery list and their address, what we do is we match them with a volunteer that's close by and can facilitate a delivery within a 24 or 48-hour time slot. Afterwards, we put the volunteer in contact with the senior directly so then they can negotiate details like where they should drop off the groceries, how can they pay for it, whether it's through electronic payment or through a check or cash. And then the volunteer goes and does the delivery while maintaining no contact with the senior. So what this looks like is that after they buy the groceries at the grocery store, they drop it off at the front door, but they never talk or interface directly with the senior. And during this whole process, they maintain CDC protection guidelines. This is personal protective equipment like masks and gloves. They use alcohol and disinfectant, and all of this is to minimize the risk to both our volunteer and the senior.
So I assume, obviously, as you said, CDC protection, obviously want to avoid that. And in terms of logistics, how do you guys handle every request? What's the group of people form like? Is it you two, or is it more people that actually one of them responsible for the email, one of them responsible for the volunteer submissions, one of them responsible to making sure everything is in place? How does it work?
Yeah, so we have a lot of divisions among our teams. So in terms of like fielding delivery requests, we generally split it up by region. So we have someone who handles all the requests for Potomac, which is like a city within our county. Someone who handles Rockville, someone who handles Gaithersburg, right, the two other major cities. And that's how our chapters tend to function as well. They sort of split up whatever region they're serving into sections, and then they have someone or a group of people, if it really grows in that area, handle the request for that location. So when someone reaches out to the chapter, they simply forward the request to whoever is handling whatever location that person happens to be in. And in terms of like other than delivery requests, we also have we have a website, we have social media, and we have a call center as well. So we people who update things. But for the most part, actually, the website has been Drew, and the social media has been me. Um, Although in terms of the call center and other logistical stuff, Drew and I are mostly not directly involved in that. So because as Drew was saying, in the actual delivery process, the teenager never really talks to the senior because we want to maintain as much distance as possible. But at the same time, because these seniors are isolated and they're not able to see their family and their friends, we feel like it's important for them to have some sort of interpersonal discussion at least. So what we do is after the delivery, we have someone from a call center call the senior and ask them how the delivery went, and then sort of strike up a conversation with them about how everything is going, etc. So a lot of our logistical stuff is managed by and it is managed in the form of teams.
And approximately, obviously, it's really hard to know exactly, but how many people work in some way or another for the group? So, as you said, a call center, volunteers across the entire
Mhm.
country. How many people would you say work not directly, but do something for the group?
Yeah. So we have 250 plus of those just in Montgomery County. Across the country and including the chapter in Canada, we have over 400 volunteers between those different sections.
And that you're planning on expanding anywhere else, maybe more Canada, overseas, down to Mexico. Is that a plan for you guys?
Yeah, so actually tomorrow we have calls scheduled with 7 other counties in the United States that are interested in starting their own chapter. Places like Seattle and Oregon and Nevada, Reno, Nevada, and so a lot of different places are reaching out to us to start their own chapters. And within the United States, there are plenty of states that we haven't actually reached yet, and a lot of counties. And so right now we're trying to get as much coverage within the U.S., especially in populated areas. But we are looking into spreading internationally. Like we got requests from Canada, from other areas of Canada, such as Toronto, and then we might also get some requests from other parts of North America, like Mexico, for example.
And
And
if you happen to know anyone in Spain who would be interested in starting a chapter, definitely tell them to reach out to us as
shoot you
well.
guys an email and
Mm-hmm.
you'll work with it.
Yep.
So obviously, speaking for personal experience here in Spain, we've seen how the curve is dropping slowly. Do you guys feel like Teens Helping Seniors is an organization necessary for COVID-19, and therefore, once this pandemic is over, it will no longer be necessary? Or are you guys planning to make it something, a regular thing for families, despite the virus being here or not?
Right. So, in the United States, actually anywhere, there's a phenomenon known as like food deserts, which are areas of the population where they can't access healthy food reliably. And so, for these food deserts, which are actually common within our own county of Montgomery County, people might have difficulty getting to grocery stores or getting the food they need. And this is where, Teens Helping Seniors could come in the post-COVID. We could help deliver food to food deserts, and that way we could help facilitate a section of the population that otherwise wouldn't have regular access to food. And that's one direction where we're looking to take Teens Helping Seniors after the pandemic.
And another thing is that we recognize that there are a lot of people who will not be able to go grocery shopping even without a pandemic, right? People who have, physical disabilities, etc. And, in many cases, these people also don't have a lot of savings. And without an organization like Teens Helping Seniors, they have to shell out their money on some form of some sort of private delivery service. So we feel like our organization will still have some form of demand from people like this after the pandemic. Obviously, it's going to be less than during the pandemic because instead of all seniors, it's like a portion of seniors. But we still feel like there will be a demand and a need for our organization. But we do not expect the demand to drop quickly soon, because our state has actually seen a very small but definitely noticeable resurgence in cases as we've started to open up. So it seems like, we thought it was going to be going away like around now. That was what was projected, but now it seems like it's going to be with us at least into the early summer. And a lot of experts are also saying there might be a second wave in the fall. Not positive, at least for our area. And I know in Europe it's a little bit different.
Yeah, here in Europe, it's we were the first ones to actually get the virus, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
So right now it seems to be easing slowly. I assume over there in the US started a little bit later, and therefore it'll end a little bit later. And one thing I noticed in your website, on the frequently asked questions page, the organization Teens Helping Seniors does not accept donations. Why is that?
So we are not officially listed as a nonprofit yet, right? We're not a 501c3. We're still a volunteer organization. We will not take cash donations directly to the organization. If you want to give us money in the form of donations, sure. But just know that any form of donation that comes in terms of money to us will go straight to the CDC Foundation for doing research on COVID. We don't accept it directly. The type of donation that we will accept is personal protective equipment for our volunteers, not cash donations. So this is things like, gloves and masks, because there are plenty of volunteers that maybe can't afford these masks or their family isn't comfortable buying these masks that could potentially benefit from, donations of protective equipment. But we don't take cash donations directly.
And just to add on to that, we have taken like sort of large like quasi cash donations, and what this means is we have organizations that reach out to us, like Giant Food, for example, organizations that want to work with us. And when organizations like that reach out to us, then we can sort of facilitate like a more, we can sort of start like a new um, thing in our organization to put that money to use. So in the case of Giant, what we did was we had, we're using the money to pay for the food for some families who can't afford it. So although we don't take like cash donations from individuals because we can't start like a project like that off of, like $50 or $100, we do say if any organizations want to reach out to us, we can find a way to use money like that, if that makes sense. So we probably should update our website FAQ page.
I was just curious about why that was the case. But yeah, your answer definitely made it a lot clearer. I had a question about whether is this a fully student ran so only students run this, or is there any adult? And when I mean students, obviously I expanded to college students as well. I know you have someone from Brown University in the organization, but is there any adult who's actually helping you guys, guiding you in some way to set the route for where this is going?
So everyone in leadership positions right now is a teen. That includes college students, but we do have a lot of parents who are highly supportive of our organization, like our own parents, and they provide support in the form of protective equipment, like I was talking about earlier. Sometimes they come along with us on deliveries to make sure everything goes all right. And so yeah, we've gotten a lot of support from adults, but all the leadership and all the actual management comes from the teens itself. And I think that's where a lot of the value of Teens Helping Seniors comes, because we're engaging teens who otherwise don't really have much else to do during the pandemic to help out their community.
And just to be clear, in terms of like volunteers, we say that like now is not the time to discriminate in terms of who's allowed to help and who's not. So if an adult reaches out to us, like we're obviously not going to say no. If an adult wants to start a chapter, we're not going to say no. So we don't have any adults starting chapters yet, but about 20% of our volunteers are currently adults, at least in this region. We don't have data for other chapters. So there are some adults who are helping our organization, even if it's largely team-led and run.
And going back to what Drew said about their parents being supportive and their family members, do you feel like they're key to the success of the organization?
Mm-hmm.
Their support, their push for you guys to keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so I would definitely say that we wouldn't have started this organization if it wasn't for our parents. I mean, while we were discussing the idea of like kind of teens helping seniors as a small thing, like I was saying earlier, but I think they're the ones who really encouraged it to take off. They're the ones who encouraged us to say, hey, why not go bigger than Montgomery County? They're the ones who first posed that question. Why is this a thing that's only restricted to Montgomery County? I'm sure seniors everywhere will feel the impacts of the pandemic. And they've also been really helpful in the deliveries because a lot of our volunteers are maybe preteens and they don't have their driving license and they can't drive. And so in that case, their parents sometimes, if it's not within walking or biking distance, their parents have to go along and drive for them so that they can do the deliveries. And so, yeah, parents have played a pivotal role in our organization, especially our own parents, who have provided us with a lot of motivation and support. And I think that's why the organization has reached the scale it has today.
That was a great answer, Drew. I mean, yeah, I was surprised too when I was reading the organization. I think you guys do a great job, and I think it's a necessary job someone has to do. What it
Thank you.
shocks me is that this seems like a simple idea. How is it possible and no one thought about it before? And you guys were pioneers in creating such a beneficial group to most of society.
Well, our theory is because there are some organizations that focus on getting adult volunteers and in some cases college volunteers to do something like this, but there aren't really any teen organizations. And so our theory behind that is that a lot of the press coverage about teens and their reaction to this has been negative. So in our case, we've had teenagers in Florida who are just going to the beach, ignoring all social distancing guidelines, and that led to a resurgence in cases early on. There were teens in our neighboring state of Virginia. It was all over the news when they started licking groceries as some sort of prank and coughing on the groceries. So there've been a lot of news stories in our nation about teenagers not understanding the importance of this virus and taking efforts to make the situation worse and not better. So to a lot of people, it might seem like, if they try to start an organization like this, they're not going to find teenagers who are willing to help because teenagers are just lazy. They're not interested in serving their community, etc. So we think that the media narrative has maybe discouraged other people from starting something like this. And when we started it, it was actually sort of a shock to us as well, as to how many teenagers were willing to help. Because, this media narrative, even if we strive to sort of overcome it, it's definitely still a backdrop and it still has a big effect on how we perceive teenagers.
So do you think that you guys creating this will change the stereotypical thinking that many adults have about teenagers and see that there's also another side to teenagers, this teenagers who actually care about their community and are willing to sacrifice their time and obviously a lot of things to help and serve the community?
Yeah, with the amount of positive feedback that we've gotten from seniors and adults in the community and the amount of press coverage that we've gotten as well, I think we're definitely starting to make a difference in terms of people's perception of teens during the pandemic. Like I think our reason why a lot of these news organizations reach out to us is because we can give them a feel-good story about teens, a motivational story about teens during the pandemic, and I think that will kind of change their perception and the community's perception of teens as like Matthew said, being lazy, not caring about social distancing and the quarantine. And so I think we're making a difference. And I think adults are starting to respect that difference, considering all the emails that we get on a daily basis saying, hey, you guys are doing great work. You help my father, my grandfather, my aunt, my uncle, and I appreciate you for helping them. And I'm surprised that teens are doing something like this during the pandemic. All the emails like that we've gotten have really shown us that we are making a difference in terms of how people see teens during the pandemic.
And how has this changed your lives? I'm just curious. Obviously, as founders of the group, you guys have probably changed from being a relatively unknown person to an actual someone who appears on the media for their good work. How has this changed personally your lives?
Well, it's definitely made both of us feel really good. About, obviously we get like national press coverage, etc. But I think more importantly, we've been able to help so many people. We've made over 500 deliveries so far on a national level, and we're growing so quickly that every single one of those trips is one senior kept away from a potentially lethal virus. So we're definitely really really proud of what we've done. And I guess, obviously it does feel good to have like national press coverage. Sometimes when we walk around, people will recognize us. People will say like, thank you for everything you're doing, etc. But most importantly, knowing that we've made such a big impact, even if we didn't get any publicity for it, is something that's definitely changed me and Drew's lives.
Mhm. Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, something that's really inspiring for me is like when people reach out to us and say, "Hey, I saw what you guys were doing and it was really inspiring. How can I start something like this of my own? Or how can I get started helping people in my community?" And so the fact that, me and Matthew being founders of Teens Helping Seniors and helping seniors on a daily basis can influence teens on the other side of the globe in completely different countries or different states is really inspiring for me, because it shows that not only are we changing people's minds, but we're also incentivizing them to do what's good in their community, and we're helping them get started on being a force for good.
And I think, in just to add a little bit more, in this case, we sort of saw that because you're from Spain, um, and we're from Maryland, and like we don't know you, we have no connection to you other than the fact that your teacher found out about us and reached out to us through social media, and then we're talking, and that's like something really cool. That's definitely like a form of validation. It definitely makes us feel good about what we're doing, that someone from Spain cared enough to do a project about it. So we're really grateful about that as well.
I mean, that's all on you. I was just looking for someone who I thought was important enough and had done something so beneficial to society, and you guys are the perfect example. I think that on
Thank
that
you.
note, we should bring it to an end. I don't want to keep you guys any longer, but just say congratulations for what you've achieved. It's really, it's really, it gives us a reason to believe in the younger generations and that they're able to do something so keen and so actually so kind to other people. Uninterested help without extra fees for delivery,
Mhm.
fully volunteered. I just think it's great what you guys are doing, and I obviously encourage you to keep doing it. And I wanted to
Thank
say
you.
thank you to you two for your availability, for being so nice on the email, so responsive. And obviously, I wish you the best. I really hope this thing ends soon, and I really hope you guys get to rest because I'm sure you've been overwhelmed with work. But for the meantime, I can only wish you the best, and
Mhm.
please keep doing what you're doing. It's really helping a lot of families who definitely really appreciate it.
Thank you, and definitely let us know how the project goes, how it turns out,
Mhm.
everything.
Well, Matthew, Drew, thank you so much. I'll stay in contact with you guys. I'll email you. But thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for reaching out to us. Have a great day.
Yeah.